Hello and welcome to Southern Summers and Northern Winters. Once again, hi, Mark, how are you?
I am very good, Anders. Back on the ground here in Australia after maybe 19 days, possibly, running around China. Well, not really running around China and Thailand, just in one city in China and one city in Thailand. So, but that was good enough, and really enjoyed our time away. Like, I had some extremes from 0 degrees and snow to 33 degrees and sweat. So yeah, we've seen it all while we were away, certainly weather-wise and
Yeah.
food and
We didn't even get to make like an impromptu, spontaneous session because well, you were there and the time difference was different, and it was just it was all Christmas and New Year's, so and we texted a couple of times, but it wasn't to be
wasn't matching up.
No,
I was out when I wanted to do it in China. We were out somewhere, and the internet in the place that I was absolutely terrible. I was lucky to some stages get Facebook on, so I could only imagine that it was probably going to cause more problems trying to record it than what it was possibly worth. So
that's the thing. I mean, I've seen a lot of commercials, advertisings for VPN clients that you can buy, but the thing about it is maybe it works. I'm not using a VPN myself, but recording is another add-on to what may cause a delay. So when we sit and chat like we do live here, we do record this, but we should not have more interferences than necessary, or more filters or things to be bypassed. So the more direct it can be, the better. So, but how was your trip? Let's dive right into that.
Let's kick it off. So, the plane left half an hour late. The plane landed an hour late,
as they sometimes do. Yeah.
The plane then sat us on the runway for half an hour before it unloaded us. So, at that stage, I was a tad bit frustrated after 12, 13 hours.
And at what time?
Board,
at what time a day did you get out of the plane then? Because this was late into the evening.
So it was maybe 8:30 China time. So it was about 11:30 Australian time. But we had been at the airport. We arrived at the airport at 7:30 a.m. Australian time. So it had been 18 hours. So, and we were up earlier than that to go, because we were staying in a hotel, to go and drop the car off at airport parking and then get transferred over to the airport. And so it had been a really long day by the time we got to China. And then to top it off, which was really nice, our daughter was there with a nice sign that she was holding up saying, "I love you, Mum and Dad." So that was
you posted that. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, so that was nice. But then we were going to catch a train into where she lives. And because the plane was delayed, we were too late to catch a train to the stop where we needed to go, because the metro would have shut down before that. So that caused more hassles. So then we had to book a car, which was okay. The price, it wasn't really the price. That wasn't here nor there. But yeah, it was just a little bit of extra hassle. And then because we couldn't get to the train station, that's where we were going to get picked up from to take them back to the apartment, but we had to get out somewhere else. So yeah, so it was all a little bit of a snowball effect on the first day. But then we got there and it was about midnight, and the people that Willow live with met us, and we went and had Chinese barbecue at midnight and drank some beer and cooked some skewers and things like that in the restaurant. So in the end, I think we got to the apartment and to bed about 22 hours after we left.
Whoa!
So it was a big day, but it ended up okay, and we got to China safely, and we stayed in a nice apartment that Willow's host family owned. So that was quite good, and so it went on from there. The weather was about zero every day. I actually got to see the snow on the beach, which was what I talked about. And it did actually, the one day it snowed, I happened to be on the beach when it snowed. So, so I was quite happy about that.
Yeah. That was one of those, well, in the old day, you would call them Kodak moments.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. That was the only day it snowed when we were there. And me and Marley happened to be down the beach this day. Rebecca was in the apartment with Willow in her apartment where she lives. And me and Marley were getting a bit bored of sitting around and doing nothing. So we said, okay, let's go for a walk down the beach. It was 2 blocks away, about 500 metres. And just as we got to the beach, I could see these big black clouds coming over. And I thought, oh, it's going to rain. But it was snow. And it snowed for maybe about an hour and a half, not enough to leave any real trace of it on the ground, but definitely enough to catch it in your hands and see it on your jacket and things like that. So that was a real treat for me because, like I said, I come from a place where it doesn't snow where I live myself. Like I would have to drive 2 or 3 hours up into the mountains to possibly see any snow. So so to actually catch it snowing was a real treat for all of us. Then I rang Rebecca and she come running down to the beach like
because of the snow.
To see this bit of a snowfall. That's it. Yeah. So little things for amused little minds possibly when you don't see that thing all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
someone in Europe like yourself, you'd go, I don't really care because I see snow every year for.
We even this. We still have a little bit of snow lying on the ground outside. It was over the holidays. It actually snowed quite a bit, and it's gone now. But it's apparently it comes back this coming weekend.
Is it?
Yeah, but not much. Not like When I was a kid, I tend to say that it was meter high for months on end, which it wasn't, but that's how I remember it.
It's amazing how we remember things as kids, isn't it? And not now. I always remember it being hot time in summer when I was a kid, and now I always say we haven't had a really good summer for a long time, like a really hot summer. But saying that, we're probably having the hottest summer here that we have had, I reckon, in a decade, literally. Like,
wow.
No real hot days in the 40s, but constantly in the 30s every day. Like, so constantly hot, 32 today. It was 39. We missed out on this on Saturday and Sunday last week was 39 both days, 41 in Melbourne, and we landed on the Monday and it was 22 and raining, so that was quite nice to land into that instead of landing into 41 degrees.
22 and raining, that's a typical European summer day.
Yep, 22 and raining it was. And I actually got home and I was cold. I had to put a jumper on because we'd been in Bangkok, obviously, as well, where it had been 33 degrees every day and steaming. And I walked out of the airport in Melbourne and I was like, jumper or something. I was literally cold, but which was quite strange because I'm not one to wear a jumper if I don't have to. But yeah, it felt cold after being in the tropical heat of Bangkok for 10 days. That was for sure. But heating back up, been 30 degrees every day since then, and 37 one day next week or something. So it's so it's been a really warmish summer, I would say, in Australia, without being off the charts in the 40s, but been a lot of days in the 30s, which a lot of people like that. I like plenty of days around the 25 mark, but when weather and taxes, you can't change them. You need to pay them. You need to have them.
It's just those things.
Yeah. So we spent 7 days in China, which was good. After going to China twice, going to where Willow lives, the one word I can describe it as is possibly frustrating a little bit, China. I think if you're in Beijing, it would not be quite as frustrating, but because where Willow lives, I think I've said this before, there's not so many English speakers, so it can get a little bit testing, and that's our fault because we don't speak Mandarin, obviously. And they don't speak English. So it was a little bit frustrating some places trying to order food or even just get a ride somewhere or even even to ask a question actually is probably the most frustrating. Like, point this way, and things like that. And it may not even be down there, and
Is
I
Willow
like China.
is Willow learning Mandarin, or can she speak?
Well, as so this will lead into my next story.
Okay.
Is coming home, so we will be able to get her on the podcast. So Willow is coming home on the 7th of February for 2 weeks.
Oh,
Lands on a Friday morning, and on the Monday morning, I have to take her back to Melbourne to the Chinese embassy to get a student visa because she's been accepted into a Mandarin course that runs at the Qingdao University. And if she passes this course, it's an intense course over 6 months where she got to learn to speak, read, and write Mandarin. And if she passes this, then she can apply at the same university to go into a Bachelor of Arts or whatever, something she wants to do a degree, because in China it costs about the equivalent of about $1,000 a year to go to university, where in Australia it's maybe $15,000 to $20,000 a year to go to university. So she doesn't speak a lot of Mandarin. She reckons she picks a little bits and pieces up because she's obviously lived with the Chinese family for 6 months. So apparently she's going to go and learn Mandarin flat out and go to university in China possibly. So I hope my daughter succeeds. So that's all I can say. I hope.
Well, she's a smart girl. Obviously, she can do this. And
she is smart, and I love her to bits. But she's not the most dedicated student, or she wasn't in high school. So
who is?
I hope she really applies herself to this. Because her mother said to her, "What are you going to do if you don't pass this?" She's like, "I'll just re-enroll and go and do it again." I'm like, "Yeah, okay then, fair enough. You've got an answer." So I think it will be really hard to learn to read, write, and and talk Mandarin all within 6 months. So,
but I mean, if she gets to understand Mandarin, and obviously the better she can become, the better. But that is where I see the future. I mean, whether we like it or not, we're gonna have to deal with China in the future. China is manufacturing literally everything we use in the Western world, and the more you can understand their culture and their language and their folklore, the better chance you will have of getting a great job.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
it'd be nice to see her home for 2 weeks.
We'll have her on.
Yeah, I'll obviously be running around like a madman. Melbourne to pick her up, back home, back to Melbourne to get her visa, probably back home, back to Melbourne to go pick up the visa, back home, back to the airport.
Yes.
All this will occur within a 2 week period, I guess. Well, she hopes it will be, because she flies back to China on the 21st, and she's got to present herself at the school to enroll on the 23rd with her visa. So, hopefully they're telling her it's because she's got an invitation letter from this university with an acceptance. The embassy are telling her that it's only, it's like a fait accompli. You just got to come, roll up, fill out the forms, pay the fee. We'll take your passport and come back 2 days later or 3 days later and pick it up, and it should all be good. So hopefully, if it's as easy as she says, well, then that's all good.
Well, it sounds like a formality, really.
Yeah, most definitely. So it's just a pity she had to fly back to Australia to do it. She couldn't change it in China, which I know happens into a lot of places where you can't change your visa status when you're there. You've got to actually leave the country, and come back to your place of origin and things like that. So
you got to keep those people busy. You have to. I mean, it's where the tax dollars go, and for diplomacy, for embassies, and well, that's just how it works. But I don't think any country is different. It's just.
So while we were in Qingdao, we visited a couple of Christmas markets.
Yes, you did.
As I said I would.
Yes, and this was one of my next points on the list, because how do you compare these to? Because you've been here in Germany and seen the real thing.
On a much smaller scale, I will say that in China. way smaller than what you would. So actually, maybe one we went to might have been on similar size. It's only something you'll know to that one that has the little Ferris wheel at the residence near Munich, like in a little court there.
Yeah, in the inner court, yeah.
Yeah, in the inner court. So a small one with maybe, I don't know, we probably went to one that maybe had 20 or 30 stalls or something like that.
Yes.
In it, they did some really good shazlik, some nice meat on a stick that they were barbecuing. That was good. They had glühwein, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. So we tried them both. The alcoholic one was better, of course.
Oh, it's the same thing
wine,
here.
Not white wine. Yeah. The non-alcoholic one was like a hot pear wine. So there was like half a pear in it, which was quite nice and different. So, but yeah, they had all the usual foods and things like that you would see. Crafts, so much like a European market. Except you had to pay to get into this one. As much as like $5 Australian, but they gave you a free tote bag, with it.
Yeah, okay. So what kind of crafts do they? Because here in Europe, you can buy your gloves or furred house shoes or whatever. Yeah. I mean, you or a sweater, a jumper, all kinds of jewelry and stuff. What did they sell there?
Yeah, look, they had a lot of handcrafted jewelry and stuff like that they were making, charms and bracelets and that sort of stuff. But mostly it was food, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
it was mainly food stalls. There was ones. I'm trying to think what Rebecca and Willow bought, but yeah, I think mainly necklaces, bracelets, all just little trinkety things like that they were selling. Not so much Christmas ornaments like you would see in Europe, because to be honest with you, Christmas is really low key in China.
Yeah,
I found this out after going there. Like the family that Willow lives with, like Christmas not even a public holiday. They just go to work like it's a normal day. So you did see some Christmas decorations up, but mainly in shopping centres. So it's obviously they want people to buy retail as you
It's
do.
An excuse for selling more stuff. Yeah.
It's much like Australia does with Halloween. We do that. Like in Australia, Halloween's
same in Europe.
Yeah, on the borderline, but shops fill themselves with lollies and buckets and goblins and, pumpkins and all that sort of jazz in hope that it's going to take off. So China was on the low key, but we did have a really lovely Christmas evening because we actually left on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. So we packed up all our stuff from the apartment that we were staying in and we dragged it all over to Willow's apartment where she lives with the Chinese family. And we had a really nice meal there and some drinks and stuff like that. Had a little party for about 3 or 4 or 5 hours. And then we jumped in a taxi at 10 o'clock on Christmas night and headed to the airport and stayed in a airport hotel because we were leaving at 8 o'clock the next morning. So but it was quite nice. We had lots of traditional Chinese food. This place is near the coast where Willow lives, so they love their seafood: prawns, oysters, pippies. I don't know if you know what a pippy is, a little shellfish thing like the size of a penny or a 10-cent coin. Inside's like a mini oyster, but real mini oyster, like the size of a 5-cent piece.
I think I've seen them. I've seen them on markets.
Coin. Yeah. So and they had these sea snails. Okay. I tried one. I tried a sea snail, I've got to say, and I wanted to like it because the Chinese people we were with were really wanting to like it, and they loved it. They were eating tons of them, but I put this big sea snail in my mouth, and it was like a slug. I had to fish it out of the shell.
Oh man!
And I chewed away on it for a little bit. And it was very chewy, very, very chewy. Like to the fact where I just couldn't get it down. I was just chewing and chewing and chewing. And then I got a serviette and just pretended to cough and dropped it in the serviette. But I thought I'll give it a try. So, and I did. So, which leads me on to another story. I actually tried some deep fried grasshoppers in Thailand. So I had a crack at the grasshopper, and he was a little bit crunchy as well. He was really crunchy. Nothing in him. He was obviously been fried, and that was all there was shells. But I found myself picking some legs out of my teeth. So that was only had about 3 or 4 of them, but I seen a bag of them and I tried it. Like they're walking around selling, scorpions and spiders and all sorts of fancy stuff there on Kosan Road, which is a popular road in Bangkok.
Yeah, I've been there too. Yeah.
It used to be for tourists and
yeah,
hippies and all that back in the day. So they walk around selling tarantulas and all sorts of shit there. So I thought I'll go the lesser of all evils and just try the grasshopper. So I bought a bag of grasshoppers, cost me about 50 cents Australian.
Yeah.
Took 3 of them and I went, okay, now I've tried that. Let's out you go.
So that leads me to a question, because this is one of the fascinating things about traveling and seeing various cultures around the globe. The food culture. I mean, because if you think about it, you say the Chinese, they have all these, they have a lot of seafood, and in Thailand you tried insects, what we would describe as insects. Really, where I'm from here in Europe, we like shrimps, for instance, but a shrimp is really just like a sea insect, isn't it? It's just where I'm going at is it's just your mind, really. I mean, the taste, and the texture may even be similar to like a shrimp or whatever you tend to like, but because it has a different origin, it's just your mind playing tricks on you, isn't it?
So do you eat the shrimp just straight, or do you have sauce on it, or do you dip it in anything,
Yeah, well, we can either fry them or boil them and put them in some rice or
and things like rice.
Yeah.
Because in Australia we have prawns, which are similar to shrimp, but I think they're bigger than.
They're somewhat bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're a big.
And we have those too, but they're imported. Yeah.
So, but in Asia, or in China, or even in Vietnam or Cambodia, they will fry the whole prawn. So then you just eat the head and you eat the tail and you eat the whole lot. Whereas, I don't know about your country, but in our country, you rip the head off.
Yes.
And you rip the tail bit off as well, and then you just eat the white flesh bit in the middle. So,
we only eat the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. But not in Asia. They deep fry it so it's all crispy, and then you just eat the whole lot. Like if you go out to a restaurant, I think I had a seafood. This was in Thailand. I had a seafood pad thai, so it had prawn in it, but they had taken the head off it, which was okay, but they left the tail bits on it. So, and they had fried it up, and it was crispy and crunchy.
Okay.
But in Australia we would pull the head and tail off it, because traditionally in our family, or maybe not all families, but we just eat them raw, and dip them in. There's different seafood sauces and things like that, or you might things like that. So we'll just sit at the table with a bowl, maybe a kilo of them, and there might be 4 of us, and we'll just sit there shelling them and ripping the heads off, and eating them as we go,
just like eating pistachios or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yes, like that, definitely. But with a kilo bag of prawns.
Yeah.
Instead, especially around this time of year, Rebecca and Marley and Willow really like prawns. I can eat them, but I find prawns much like crayfish. They're just or like lobster. They're a white flesh, and unless you put something on them, they've really got a great deal of taste to them. So it's what you add onto them that I guess can make them taste all that much better. But prawns is definitely a big Christmas traditional thing, sort of in Australia.
Well, it's probably in season at Christmas in Australia. I would reckon. I mean,
it's definitely, but most of them, unless you get them fresh off a boat, you buy them in a supermarket. They all come from Vietnam or somewhere anyway.
Yeah,
that's probably the ones you eat. They're all imported, frozen, and then defrosted in the supermarket deli, or wherever you get your cold meat section from.
Exactly.
And that's where you buy them. But,
exactly. Yeah.
But in China, because we were on the coast, they were just buying them fresh, I think, and bringing them around, much like the sea snails and the pippies, as they call them, and bits of fish and things like that, because this town that Willow lives, Qingdao, is renowned throughout China for its seafood, and there's a whole like street that's this seafood restaurants that go for 500 meters to a kilometer. It's this seafood restaurants on each side of the street. Like Severin, you can go up. They got the big glass tanks, and you can pick out your fish that you want, or whatever you want, and they'll take that fish out of that fish tank, and they'll take him out the back. And 10 minutes later, he'll appear on your plate, all fried up and descaled, and
still with the eyes on, looking at you.
Yeah. Sometimes if you want the head, mostly with the head, yes, and ready to go. So.
So what was the strangest thing you had to eat? What was that? The sea snail?
That was definitely the sea snail.
Yeah,
by a long shot, I would say.
Yeah,
most definitely. I just, because it's hard to read the menu, we just go into a restaurant and I have a look at, and I just point and go, in China especially. Thailand's a little bit different, so you just see a lot of their food is obviously based around sort of stir fries, vegetables, and rice, and different types of meat, and so there's a lot of that on the go. One of the better things I actually did in Qingdao, which I found quite fascinating, was I visited a Chinese military museum, which I was unsure whether Westerners would be welcome at a Chinese military museum. There was no hassle. I had to cough up my passport, and I didn't even have it, so they accepted a photo of it that was on my phone. So I went to the Chinese Naval Museum, or the People's Liberation Army Naval Museum. So it's like the National Navy Museum, apparently, for the whole country. And it was huge. Like, it was massive. Like, you could go on full-size submarines and battleships, like older ones that were, maybe from the start of the end of last century, but still with the big guns and everything on them. So you could, you were able to walk out on the bow with the big cannons and things like that, and go in the submarine. And
was it an inside museum, or did it has like both? Like a harbour where you could go to?
It had a harbour where the boats were, but it also had an indoor part that had 4 big galleries where they had, lots of guns and cannons and weapons and lots of stuff on the wall talking about the progression of the Chinese Navy from the days when Mao Zedong created, the country under the communist banner that they live now, and how it's progressed along. And then once you got to about the fourth gallery, that was modern times, and that was when Xi Jinping appeared on just about every second picture, the whole way through it. I reckon I counted him on about 25 pictures in the space of about 50 meters. So there was definitely some propaganda happening as well for the current premier of China. There was no doubt about that.
Obviously,
But it was quite good and quite interesting, and I really enjoyed we spent about 4 hours at this place because it was massive. I really enjoyed going and having a look and having a learn about Chinese military history, or just any history, because I really like going to some different types of museums like that, which I found to be really, really quite good, especially with the full-size boats and submarines that were out.
It's funny that you would say that you were surprised that they would let in Westerners or foreigners. On the other hand, I'm thinking, why wouldn't they? I mean, they obviously are proud of their military, and obviously you won't see any military secrets there.
No, no, not at all.
So it's
you always see the same people. Sometimes, like in cities like Qingdao, if you go to places like maybe a military museum, and we were the only Westerners there, no doubt about it. I didn't see another. Occasionally you'll see the same person walking past you a few times. So so like they definitely keep an eye on you, like and what you're doing, like so. But it's much like if you fly on a Chinese airline, even from Australia or anywhere, there's always like Chinese air marshals on board. Like there'll be two different guys dressed in black, and you'll see them walk from the front of the plane to the back and like back up the other aisle. Like, and they do this maybe, I'd say, once an hour or so. Just I'm not sure why. I don't know if they think someone's going to blow the plane up, but there's always definitely some Chinese government air marshals on board as well. Make sure that everything's going as planned, I guess. So
I mean. Yeah, you can never be sure what's going to happen in the current world. Things are developing very rapidly, but the thing about being like supervised, I don't think the Chinese mind. I don't think they even think
No,
about it. They're just
no, they don't.
constantly monitored in
Yep.
in one way or another.
Yeah.
That whole idea to most Westerners is like, we wouldn't like that, but who knows? Probably we are monitored
I
in
would say we are. We
yeah.
don't know, do
We
we?
just don't know it.
At least
Um,
they're blanket out front with it, like, and this is what happens, like, and they do. I don't think it doesn't worry them, and to be honest, it doesn't worry me. I don't think if you're not doing anything wrong,
no.
there's really no concern about being spotted every block where there's a camera, things like that. It's in some retrospects it could make people feel safer as well,
Yeah, that would
especially in
be
a foreign country.
the political argument, for
Yeah,
the safety of the public,
yeah,
of the people
definitely.
that we need to monitor. Um, it won't go well in Europe. I can tell you that
No,
political argument is just dead
yeah,
before you even make it, because
yeah,
we won't accept it. It's particularly in Germany.
yeah,
There's a very, very high awareness of your privacy,
yeah,
which is one of the reasons why the Germans are so far behind digitally.
yeah,
It's come to an almost ridiculous point, but I mean, literally, we write pen and paper, we fax things, stuff like that, and in China, you can't even, from what I've heard, you can't buy like a cell phone without they taking your picture, or you have
Oh yeah,
a digital
you'd have to
photo.
have for sure. You'd have to hand everything over in order to get that done. One thing I did, I'm not quite sure if this happens in Europe or somewhere else around the world, but boarding a plane to leave China the other day in Qingdao, you didn't have to show your boarding passes. They had facial recognition. You just looked at the camera
Yeah.
and it let you through. Like, which I found was fantastic. Like, I was really on board with it because I hate having to pull everything out again and show
Yeah,
the pass.
but absolutely,
Yeah,
I absolutely buy the convenience of it.
yeah,
Is brilliant. The German side, I've lived long enough in Germany to say,
yeah.
where is that data stored, and what do they do with it?
Well, you had to actually have your face scanned on the way into the airport anyway to get through customs. So they would already have had your image anyway. So
Yeah,
when you went through customs or when you went through immigration to actually get into the international departure area. So hang on one second, my daughter is ringing. Can you ring Mum? I'm just doing podcast. Thank you. Um, Yeah, so they'd already had your picture when you went in, and they'd already scanned your fingerprints and stuff, which they
yeah,
do in China regularly.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so I guess it was already in the system from about an hour beforehand when you went through, and then you just walked up to the gate and looked at it and the way it went. And actually, they also had it in Bangkok. They weren't using it, so I don't know whether it was this getting implemented, but the actual screens were there when we went to board out of Bangkok, but they
Yeah.
weren't. Yeah, they weren't in Bangkok. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed it because normally once you go through and you check your luggage in and you show them your passport and your boarding pass to go through immigration, then you go in and you wait for your flight to be called, and then your flight's called, then you got to pull it all out.
Yeah.
So I've got, because there's four of us, we just put it away in a bag, and then you go back up and you have to pull it all out again. So so for me to actually go up there and just look at the camera, I was like, yeah, this needs to happen everywhere. For everything.
That's I absolutely agree. This is where I guess this is where things are headed anyway. Um, but there is some legitimate concern, in terms of if hackers they hack their way into like a huge
Most
database,
definitely.
and what do they do with all this?
For sure.
all this
sure.
information, your facial. I was even hesitant. Now I have done it because it was just too much of a hassle not to do it. But on my cell phone, there's facial recognition, so I just look at it and it opens up. But for a long time, I didn't do that because where are they keeping this? Yeah. But
all the best hackers in the world come from China, so I felt safe doing it in China.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they say anyway. So So I found that that was quite good at the airport in China. So they're really strict in China at the airport. Like they go through everything in your bag. You really got to pull basically every single thing out of your bag, literally in China. So
don't you think they could
security is
don't you think they could X-ray it anyway? So it's just for show.
Can do that everywhere, can't they? Like but if anything electronic or like even your battery pack, like for your mobile phone, they want to see it because some of them are made to different standards, and if it's not up to must be a certain standard or volt or something, they'll take it off you, throw it away. So yeah, in some ways.
Which is funny because the cheapest batteries not living up to like proper standards, they're usually manufactured in China, aren't they?
Oh, well, everything's manufactured in China, isn't it? This is the thing. So I don't know, like this might be a bit controversial, but I find China a little bit like Germany. Everything's in order. Like there's an order, everything runs orderly, most of the time, and there's a way to do everything, and
yeah.
So like it's much like Germany in that respect at the airport or while you're waiting in line, things like this. Yeah,
but from what you're telling, I can tell they're taking it a little further in China than they are in Germany.
My daughter said, like I said to her, we're at the market or we're out somewhere, and I was like, there's so much food in China that comes on a stick. Everything is on a stick. Like if you go to a night market, all the food that you can buy, 90% of it is on a stick. And I said, what's the go with all the food on the stick? And she said, China is all about convenience. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Same with the face scanners at the airport. That's convenient. It's all about, I don't know whether it's because there's so many people and, convenience is a big thing when you've got 1 billion and plus people, I guess, living in your country. But it sort of all ties into... And any way they can make it easier and quicker and probably still store your data without you actually thinking that's what they're doing. They're making you think that it's convenient, possibly. But they seem to be doing it.
So how was that in Thailand for comparison? You said they were implementing something at the airport, maybe.
In Thailand they had the same. Same screens to look into, but they weren't working in Thailand. So I don't know whether it's something they're just bringing in, like to scan your face at the boarding gate as well.
Yeah,
I assume every country will have them soon, like we said.
Probably, yeah. And Thailand is a big tourist destination, so obviously they will want to have to get people through bottlenecks at the airport very fast and
going
without delays.
Going from an organised airport in China, like in a city of 10 million people, where there really wasn't that many people at the airport and everything was orderly and clean and nice. And then we landed in Bangkok and it was like a chaotic bomb had exploded at the airport in Bangkok. Yeah. It was like, oh my God, what's happening here? Like, there's people running everywhere. But I sort of like that mass chaos as well a little bit because too much organisation, can be a little bit boring, and it's sort of good to step out of the box that we have in Western countries a lot, where we've got a law for everything and everything should be done this way, and I find a bit of freedom in like jumping in the back of a tuk-tuk with no seatbelt, ripping around the streets of Bangkok, and things like that. Because, you know what?
It's just a different experience.
I didn't die. Life didn't come to an end. I didn't actually have to put that seatbelt on. Things like that. So I
because
think
in China, you would have a sense that you would be that your photo would be taken if you didn't put that seatbelt on, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, so They actually do tell you that. Like, if you get into a ride share there, especially the person in the front, they don't really care about the back. The person in front, they're like, put seatbelt on. Like, because they would see you. But I don't know, because it's hard to have a conversation with the drivers. I don't really know whether they get fined or not, but they would always make sure the person in the front had the seatbelt on. In the back, they didn't really care. So the person in the front, they wouldn't take off until you had your seatbelt on. And the same in Bangkok as well. So, but so it's all good. And like, if Willow's in China, we'll be back. We'll have to go back to China, I guess, at some stage.
So you don't want to be in trouble with the authorities when you get back,
No.
you know?
No, I love China. Just in case they're listening, China's a great country. I really love China. I enjoy going there. So, and I'll be back in October. Okay, so fast track me through immigration.
All good.
That would be nice. I do. I think a lot of people who have negative image and negative connotations about China are people that have never been to China and don't don't really know about China. And I fight battles with these people on YouTube all the time. People always leave me comments like, I cannot follow you anymore because you like China, and all this sort of stuff like this. And I always say, have you been to China?
Yeah.
And they're like, no. And I say, well, it's pretty easy to have an opinion that's manufactured by the Western media and fed to you, on television and things like this. So until you've been there, just, have an open mind about what's going on, I guess.
one of my best friends, he's regularly in China. He's doing a lot of business. He's importing stuff from China, manufactured in China, and he says, it's great. He travels there about once or twice a year to just make sure that things are in order,
right.
And he's even got a full-time employee. To coordinate things locally, but he needs to be there from time to time. And he says, it's always, like you say, it's always properly managed. It's always nice and clean. It's always, as you would expect. So I
don't know what people expect it to be. Like, I don't know whether they think it's like a third world country, or that the police are walking around one step behind you, or that that your liberties are curtailed. As far as I can see, the only liberties that are curtailed is that you can't access Facebook and Instagram, Google. Basically, because, well, I'm not even going to say because they don't want you to. They don't want you reading negative stuff about their own country, I guess.
Which is a little funny for a Westerner to think about. They have this honor and pride codex, I guess, that we don't really understand, because patriotism, this is another thing. Patriotism, for instance, for an American, that's a badge of honor, whereas in Germany, patriotism is a little frowned upon.
It doesn't wash in Australia either, I can tell you. I think we're all here to hate our government, basically, not like our government, that's for sure.
So, and
I can't think of anyone I know who says, the government's doing a good job, and I really love our government. There's no way that's happening anywhere.
No, exactly. And I mean, in China, the thing about, what could possibly happen if people were to criticize the government? I mean, what's the worst thing? They will lose face a day or two, and then as a politician, that's what you do all the time in the Western society. It's just, but they have a different way of seeing things there. So I think a lot of it has to do with the old men governing the country, doesn't it?
Oh, most definitely. There's no doubt about that. And I guess in some ways, everything affects different people in a different way. And, at the speed that China are able to build infrastructure and things like that, they can build it because their government can say, this is where we're building it. And that's the way it's going. And it doesn't matter what you think about it as, a population, or as a people who are living there, or if there's a tree frog there or something like that. That's the way we're building it, and that's where we're building it, and we'll have it finished in 2 years. Whereas in the West, we would be debating the tree frog for the first 5 years before we even laid a pillar down on this railway track, and then then we'd have to pay 15 different consultants to do a plan to to see, and then we would have to have a tender with 10 different people, and
Yes.
and by the time we got around to it, it'd be 10 years, and we wouldn't have even built anything.
Exactly.
And China would have built 10 of them by that stage.
Yeah, and you're even forgetting the political committee that it will have to go through. so
and I mean, that's not helpful for everyone. I realise that in China, like obviously people are displaced and things like that by the government just being able to rule with an iron fist and do what they want to do. But in some ways, I don't know if there's a happy medium in between the way we do things and communism does things. But I just find that in the West, we're so bogged down with red tape and rules and and worrying about what everyone thinks that nothing's actually really getting done.
No, that's true. I absolutely agree. I mean, I think I've mentioned this before, but just an example: the subway system in Munich is undergoing a massive expansion and renovation, and then they discovered asbestos in many of the old subway stations, and obviously that had to be removed, and new fire protection and all these things. The thing about it is, I've been coming and living in Munich for the past 20 years. I cannot remember any time at all where it wasn't one big construction site. Yeah. It's just, constantly something. And as soon as they finish one place, they start like 100 meters away, digging again and doing something new. And as soon as one subway station is finished, maybe a couple of months later, they pull down the wall panels because they want to do something new. And it's just, there's always something going on. And I always joke about it. Well, why don't they just, sit down and plan this thing properly and get it done once and for all? And then, we could live 50 years without having this mess all around. So, but it's because of committees and the political decision-making system, but also because of the rules. The Germans love their rules. And once a rule is in place, they don't really like to change it because they're very conform and they trust the system in many ways. Although if you cast them privately, they will tell you differently. But officially they will always say, the system is there so that we can all be sure that nothing corrupt is going on. Which is obviously not the case, but it's just, and in China, it's just the opposite, things get done, like you say. It's just, you don't have all these interferences.
It's really hard to gain a sense of what they think about their government, I guess, because even the people Willow lives with, like they'll ask you, what do you think of China? But they will never make any real statement themselves about what their government, like they just say, I think China's a bit misunderstood, which I think is a fair statement.
Yeah,
just discussed, but but I would doubt you would ever hear many Chinese say anything bad about their system. I think because it's that honour thing as well, like they don't want to be seen to be criticising a lot of them. Especially ones that are in, I wouldn't say privilege, but ones that are doing well and are well off. Like there's no real need for them to criticise the system that they're in. They've got good jobs, they've got good pay, they've got all the luxuries that anyone in the West would have, and and more, and their country's secure. So there's no real need for them to criticise their way of life, because that's all they've ever known, I guess.
Yeah, I guess if they criticise, they could actually lose their position.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. So
but that's true, because that's just because we're brought up differently in the West. We're brought up, it's okay to have a critical mind here. And those of us who have a critical mind and we think about things and we observe things, it's hard not to once you start, isn't it? It's just... I would notice these things in China, but obviously I wouldn't I wouldn't want to interfere. I wouldn't want to criticize publicly, but I would in my mind I would observe and say, that's odd. But that's just because I come from a different part of the world.
But I mean, really, in the West, we may have an opinion, but we can't really enact change.
No, that's true.
Though, can we? So,
no.
We can say this is wrong, but in the end, the government is going to do what the government wants to do.
Yeah.
And so the only real difference is they don't talk about it and they go along with what their government wants to do. We can talk about it, disagree with our government, but our government's still going to do what our government wants to do. So the systems everywhere are closely aligned. It's just that our government says, okay, you've got the liberty to say you don't like it, but we're not necessarily going to take that into consideration. We're
exactly. We don't care about your opinion anyway, so
we don't care about your
go
opinion.
ahead.
You can say what you want, but your opinion is mute, really.
So probably, I would even say sometimes, the Chinese, maybe they're even smarter because they just live with the fact, and we in the Western world, we're just stupid enough to think that we can change something which which we probably can't.
Shouldn't we?
Yeah.
But hey, this is life, isn't it? And like I said, we live within the system we live with, and everyone can have a better life, everyone can have a worse life, but I'm sure your life's fine, my life's fine. So
that's the thing. That's the thing about, for instance, that we see in Russia at the moment, because, the war in Russia and Ukraine. And one of the real concerns for Putin is actually if the public starts to suffer too much. As long as the public feels safe and they're more or less comfortable and to whatever extent they're used to, he can pretty much do what he wants. At the moment, the media are full with things here in Europe about the public in Russia are suffering, and that's when Putin is facing trouble, on a domestic level. And I guess because it leads into what you were saying, as long as the Chinese population feels safe and secure, and who cares? I mean, what the government does, and it's the same thing here. It's just differently in the Western world. Yeah. But as long as we more or less feel safe and secure, and we can travel, we can,
Yeah. I'm actually unsure that there's any Russians left in Russia after being in Thailand. Quite frankly, there is so many Russians in Thailand that, especially in Bangkok, every second voice was Russian. I reckon the plane we caught from Guangzhou in China to Bangkok, I reckon at least half the plane was Russian. So I don't know whether the upper middle class that is like, okay, let's get out of here. And the same as when we were in Bali last time, tons of Russians. So they're upwardly mobile to get out of Russia, and I don't know if they're just on holidays or they're trying to live in Thailand and in Bali. But it's pretty easy to get a 5-year visa in Thailand as long as you can show you've got some money in the bank. You can you can live there. So lots of Russians.
I'm not even sure what the rules are for entering an EU country from Russia. I don't think there are. Maybe there are planes. I don't know.
When I was in Bali earlier, maybe not this year, but last year, just after it sort of all kicked off. So what a lot of them were doing to get to Bali was they were flying from Moscow or St. Petersburg or wherever, and they were flying to Kazakhstan because Russia and Kazakhstan are friends.
Yeah.
But then, but there was no ban on them flying from. They couldn't fly from Russia to Bali or places like that, but they could fly from Kazakhstan, from Almaty or Astana or Nur-Sultan, the capital as they call it these days. They could then fly on from there to wherever they wanted to. So it was like a big loophole thing. They couldn't fly there directly from Russia, but if they went to a neutral third party, like Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or one of the stans that are slightly friendly with Russia, but are also friendly with the West. So that was the way.
It's probably. I mean, same thing with trains and buses and
definitely.
So you just put an extra stop over, and this
and go
away
from
you
there.
go. Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, the Russians, yeah, they even like 15 years ago when we were traveling around the world, well, it's not 15 years ago, 12 years ago, we had we saw a lot of Russians in Phuket in Thailand as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, they
And
love them.
yeah, they weren't really the most tidy
No,
people.
they're not. I don't think they're well liked. I can tell you that they're not well liked. They're held in the same esteem as Americans sometimes
Yeah,
overseas. Very, very ignorant and things like that,
yeah.
and very pushy and yeah. So I didn't.
Yeah,
think
and
that anyone
they
was,
threw their plastic waste just on the
Yep,
streets, it's just
yep,
stuff
things
like that. You know, it's
Yeah,
really to a point where it was almost insulting to
yeah,
at least to me because I
pretty
saw it
much.
and I immediately reacted. I had my son,
Yeah.
2 years old or 2.5 years old at the time. He even reacted, said, "Pop, he's not allowed to do that." I said, "No,
No.
he's not." But you know,
Like if you Google it, you'll find many articles on the Balinese like hating Russians, and things like that, and the
yeah,
fact that they're all occupying the island and that they're starting up illegal businesses and all this sort of stuff like that. At one stage, they were going to stop granting visas to Russians, the Indonesians, where it was becoming that much of a problem at one stage.
yeah, yeah.
There's even an area now on Google Maps in Bali called Little Moscow.
Oh,
There's that many of them. So
yeah.
that's a bit of an issue for them. But hey, what can you do? At the same time, Asian countries love the money, so they're not really going to care where their visitors are coming from a lot of the time, as long as they're coming.
The thing is, they probably should care a little bit about where it's coming from because on the long term, it will just hurt their business because, for instance, a lot of the people a lot of my friends, they don't go to certain areas anymore because of that, because it's simply become too much, too destroyed, too polluted. So at least they've lost that business. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Another thing I noticed in Bangkok that you would not have seen maybe last year, not even maybe the year before, and you would have went to prison and got hung for, is now their acceptance of marijuana.
They even have
Bangkok.
cafes now, don't they? They have coffee shops.
I mean, every block there is literally a shop selling weed on everywhere you go. Mind you, though, they're pretty I wouldn't say self-conscious, but conscious of the fact, much like Amsterdam, they're not really walking around in the open smoking it, which is the ones that are tourists, obviously, of course, not Thais. But I wandered into a couple of these shops and had a bit of a squiz just through just to see what it was, what they were all about, and what was going on. And
doing your research.
They actually call it a marijuana medical dispensary. But you don't need to have a script to purchase it, so you don't need to have any medical reason at all. But yeah, literally on every block, and you'd go in and there was like a menu of maybe, I'm not quite sure how you grow 50 different types of marijuana.
Wow.
And how you grade it. Like there's all gradings of the strength of the THC in it. All this stuff like that, and like prices were also looking at like starting from about 15 euros for a gram, a bag of marijuana, or you could buy a pre-rolled joint for about maybe 5 euros of marijuana. But yeah, it's quite startling because I always go back to days where I remember people getting hung in Thailand and shot, things like that for being caught with any, with a gram of marijuana or even a bit in your bag, things like that. And now
you were told you need to check your bags extra at the airport to make sure that someone didn't put stuff into your bag. I mean,
and now it's just openly out in the air and for everyone. And I'm sure, look, I assume that has probably increased their tourism. Like, there's no doubt about it. People go to Amsterdam to smoke pot. So I can imagine, in nice areas like Phuket and things like that, people would be enjoying sitting on the beach, I guess, smoking pot and doing whatever they do.
It has even been legalized partly in Germany last year. And I can tell you from just the other day we were walking in the inner city, and it was really just everywhere you could just. It was just in the air, that smell of weed. You just really again.
But so maybe it's just finally becoming mainstreamly accepted.
I guess so.
To smoke weed. I mean, it's the lesser of all drugs, apparently. So.
They say it's alcohol is a stronger drug.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's one of those cultures in our communities that's just we alcohol is harmless, which it isn't. But it's considered socially harmless. But it's
a bit of a saying, like you never see a couple of stoners fighting, but people who have had too much alcohol, they're out there punching on and kicking cars and breaking windows, and doing stuff like that. But a couple of people smoking a joint are, more likely to be sitting around eating some food and having a giggle,
and listening to some music or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. So maybe another way society's got it backwards again, but who knows?
Yeah.
Probably because they couldn't tax it. Now they've worked out a way. If we legalise it and sell it, then we can tax it, can't we? Instead of having a black market. So.
In my native Denmark, there's this Christiania, this hippie city, where
Copenhagen.
In Copenhagen, and it used to be one of the. It was never legal, but it was where the police, at least they knew, okay, we've got it under control here.
Yeah,
it's sort of just based there, and now just last year they deteriorated. They tore down that street in Christiania where they would sell marijuana. It was called Pusher Street, and so now the thing it was a political decision. But the police said, which was a legitimate argument. They say, it will make it harder for us to control.
Yeah. Because we know where it's happening here.
Exactly. And now it's all over the city instead.
Yeah.
So it's just, but there were some politicians, they needed a victory and they needed,
So once again, it goes back to that whole generational thing, that drugs are bad and everything like that is really bad, and like we said, you're unlikely to be having trouble with too many people smoking pot, but people have been drummed into their heads over the journey that all drugs are bad for you. But like we said, people drink alcohol and people smoke tobacco. That's an addictive drug, maybe more addictive than a lot of other drugs.
True.
We tolerate that because it's mainstream, isn't it? So.
Well, this is apparently humans. We need our substances. I don't know what it is with us, but it's whether it's red wine or a beer or pot or whatever. I mean, it's really all just poison, isn't it?
Corona while I was here.
Yeah. Well, where you're sitting right now, it's Friday afternoon. So
it is. It's 8 p.m. Friday night. So,
of course.
And like I said, in the preview show, I just rushed in the door because we got up at 9 o'clock and we drove 197 kilometres east up to a place called Cape Conran. It's in far East Gippsland. We're in East Gippsland, but this is a section of Victoria that's very underpopulated and probably remote, and it's like a really wild coastline, lots of rocks and reefs and white sand beaches as far as the eye can see, with very few people on them anywhere. So
wow.
It's a really wilderness area. A lot of people go there to do deep sea fishing and diving and things like that.
Any dangerous animals?
Yeah, there would be. I've seen a big monitor lizard about I would say nearly a metre long running across the road, but there'd be sharks up there and seals and snakes and all sorts of stuff if you got off-road too far. But it's in a national park, so it comes to an ending at this place called Cape Conran where this white sand beach is. No caravan parks there or anything like that because it's a national park, so it's a really nice pristine area. I had my niece and nephew were staying up there near this cape in a caravan park in the bush, so we thought we'd go for a bit of a drive up there, and I hadn't been up there for 3 or 4 years, so it was quite a nice day, but a long day because we stopped at a few towns on the way through and grabbed a coffee and something to eat and had a bit of a look around. And
well, that new car of yours needs to run its kilometers, doesn't it?
Well, this place is actually closer to Canberra than it is to Melbourne, so that's how sort of far away it is from mainstream Victoria. So it's only 235. Well, Orbost is the biggest town that's near. It's about 20k away from it. So Orbost is 235 kilometres away from Canberra, which is the capital of Australia, or 375 kilometres away from Melbourne. So it's sort of in the middle of nowhere, but closer to obviously Canberra. So you'd have to drive out of Victoria through New South Wales and into the ACT, and you would get to Canberra before you would get to Melbourne, which is the capital of the state that Cape Conran and Orbost is in.
Yeah.
So it's out in the middle of nowhere, really. Once you get to this section of Victoria where it is, there's really only maybe you'd leave Lakes Entrance and there would be Orbost and Cairn River, and then there'd be the border. So in about 250 kilometres, there'd be two towns until you get to New South Wales border, and then there would be another probably 50 kilometres or so before you get to a town. So there might be close to 300 kilometres with about two towns on the highway, and that's about it. So
wow. You need to make sure you don't run out of gas and,
No, lots of forests, famous river called the Snowy River, and flows in there as well. So, really, really nice, pristine area. I think you can go up there, and I might go up there and stay a couple of nights. I think I quite enjoyed the remoteness of it all, I think, after... Maybe that's because I've been in Bangkok and there's 12 million people running around everywhere. Getting jammed in escalators and trains and train stations and things like that. But I actually enjoyed my time up there today. So we might go back up there next month or something and spend a night or two somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
A couple of nice pubs up there and a brewery.
A brewery even,
there's a brewery up there.
Yeah. You got a lot of these microbreweries.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's called Sailor's Grave. Sailor's Grave Brewery. Had a sample plate, as they call it. So you get a board, and they have 6 different types of.
Smaller glasses.
Yeah, little 150 ml glasses. So we tried 6 of them. So it was quite nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to talk about in the next. Let's leave it that for the next episode. We could dive more into Bangkok, maybe your latest experience. But already now, this first episode of the year is way over an hour. So as things tend to,
does.
Yeah. You have been listening to Southern Summers and Northern Winters with me, Anders, and Mark on the other side of the globe. Do follow us, Mark, on you're in charge of the Facebook,
Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Go to the website. I'll give Anders all the information, and you can list them all in the show notes coming up from now on, and we should be able to click through to all of them and follow us. Please follow us, and if you're listening, please ask us some questions. Like we want some feedback from our listeners, and we're happy to answer questions and discuss anything that you want.
We are getting more. Still, for the life of me, I can't understand why it takes so long. But the analytics, when you dive into like Apple and Spotify, it's still, telling me it needs more data to I guess it needs more time, really, to sort of properly tell us where people are and how many, and so. But I can see that we're trending upwards. We're trending upwards. So we are getting more traction, which is good, which is encouraging. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back. We'll be back soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye, guys. Bye.